Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to take important ideas, really break them down, and figure out how you can actually use them.
That's the goal.
Today, we're really getting into Brian Post's Lesson 8. It's all about breaking through what he terms the parenting matrix.
Right.
And just a heads up, if you came looking for that perfect, no mistakes parenting guide, well, maybe adjust your expectations a bit.
Yeah, definitely. Because our mission today, based on Brian Post's work, is actually pretty counterintuitive.
Also,
Well, the core idea is that real success in parenting might mean we need to not just accept failure, but actually embrace it.
embrace failure. That sounds challenging.
It is. But we're going to unpack this, pull out the actionable steps from Brian Post on how you can turn those slip-ups, those moments you usually feel ashamed about, into, well, real growth, monumental growth even.
Okay, and Brian Post really throws down the gauntlet early on, doesn't he? He basically says, if you're not failing, you're probably not pushing yourself, not moving beyond your comfort zone, or really trying to expand who you are as a parent.
Exactly. Failure, in his view, isn't incompetence. It's almost like proof you're in the game, proof you're doing the work.
Okay, so the parenting matrix, let's define that a bit more based on his work. What is he actually pointing to there?
Good question. So when Brian Post talks about the matrix, he's really talking about that collective conditioning, the shame-based, often punitive stuff that gets passed down.
Like how we were parented influences how we parent.
Precisely. Often rooted in things like fear, maybe guilt, control. It's the stuff we do automatically.
And he uses this metaphor, the old suit. What's that about?
The old suit. Yeah, that's simply the conditioned behavior pattern. It's like muscle memory, right?
Okay.
When you're stressed or tired or something triggers you, your brain just defaults to what it knows. Even if what it knows isn't helpful or is even destructive.
So trying to parent differently means you're bound to slip up.
Brian Post suggests, you're trying on this new way, this conscious, connected approach, but that old suit, it's still hanging there. The failure is just you accidentally putting it back on for a moment.
Okay, so the goal isn't perfection, it's transformation. I get that intellectually.
Right.
But practically speaking,
Right.
we're bombarded, aren't we? Social media shows us everyone else seemingly nailing it. Perfect families, perfect moments. How do you genuinely learn to love failure when everything screams that failure is like the worst thing?
It requires a massive mental shift, a total reframe.
Yeah.
Brian Post argues failure is just, a necessary part of learning any new way of being, especially one this deep.
Because you're fighting ingrained habits.
Exactly. Think about it. You're trying to rewire neural pathways maybe laid down since you were tiny. That takes huge effort.
Yeah.
So when you slip, you yell, you punish in a way you didn't want to. That's not you being bad. It's data.
Data.
Yeah, data showing you exactly where that old suit, that old conditioning still fits snugly, where it still has a grip on you.
That's a really different way to look at it. The matrix message, as he calls it, implies perfection is achievable if you just try hard enough, read the right book.
Right. And Brian Post says point blank, that kind of perfection doesn't exist. Everyone struggles daily.
So he shifts the goalposts entirely.
Completely. The only perfection, maybe, is perfecting the process of growing yourself. Failure isn't a wall. Brian Post calls it another detour on your pathway to parenting success.
A detour, not a dead end.
Exactly. The moment you stop seeing it as this final judgment on your character and start seeing it as feedback, necessary feedback, you change the whole game.
Okay, I'm starting to see the value. But if we accept failure happens, and maybe it's even useful, how do we actually use it? Brian Post gives us more than just philosophy, right? He has that 4-step toolkit.
He does. And this toolkit is designed to be the antidote to that shame spiral, that knee-jerk reaction the metrics kind of feeds on.
So when you mess up, when you put on that old suit,
You have to consciously choose a different response. You have to initiate this growth and awareness.
okay, let's walk through those steps. Because normally when you fail, the first reaction is often fast and critical, right? Like beating yourself up immediately. How does this process slow that down?
It starts with something absolute fundamental. The pause. Step 1, stop, breathe, reflect.
Stop, breathe, reflect.
Stress is like hitting the brakes. In that high stress moment, maybe you just yelled, maybe you did something you instantly regret. You have to physically stop the action and stop the internal judgment too. Create some space.
That breathing sounds crucial for creating that space.
It really is, because step 2 flows from that. Observe.
Observe what? the child.
No, observe yourself, your internal state. What was happening in your body right before you reacted? What was the actual trigger? Were you exhausted, feeling unseen? You're not analyzing the child's behavior here. You're analyzing your conditioned response.
Got it. Observing your own reaction.
Yeah.
Which sets up step 3. Grow in your awareness.
Exactly. This is where you start connecting the dots. Observation is data collection. Awareness is the analysis. You might realize, oh, wow, whenever my child makes that specific sound, I have the same flash of anger my own parent used to have.
Linking the past conditioning to the present moment.
Yes. And Brian Post is clear. This is where you push your comfort zone, recognizing these deep, often inherited patterns. It's uncomfortable, deeply uncomfortable sometimes.
You have to be willing to step into that discomfort.
Yes, out of the comfort of blaming or just reacting and into the discomfort of seeing your own stuff.
Okay. And the final step, step 4, sounds more forward-looking. Ask yourself, what could I have done differently?
Right. This immediately pulls you out of just wallowing in the mistake and into, well, practical next steps. You've got the data from observing, the understanding from awareness. Now you plan how to iterate, how to try differently next time.
That's the engine for change then.
Absolutely. And Brian Post gives us some tough, reflective questions here. Like, how do you usually react to failure? Is it that old matrix stuff, judgment, blame, shame, and the big one? How can you reframe this specific failure, the slip up, as a tool for growth, for accountability?
So the whole framework lets you fail often, fail fast, look at it, learn, and try again.
Precisely. It's about dynamic change, not chasing some static, impossible ideal.
That's a really practical toolkit. But, sometimes tools aren't enough on their own. Sometimes it takes one of those really big mistakes, a visceral one, to force a deeper shift.
Yeah.
And Brian Post shares a story like that, doesn't he? A really personal one. A parenting failure that he says changed his whole life's direction.
He does, and it's incredibly powerful because it shows how that clash between old conditioning and sudden stark awareness can happen in an instant.
That's a scene for us.
Okay. He was young, just 23, studying graduate school. He paints this picture, small kitchen, early morning. He and his daughter's mother are just bickering.
He uses that specific word, bickering. Not a huge fight, but
this low-level grating tension, he says it had its own frequency that just filled the space. And apparently it stressed out his little daughter, Michaela. She was only about 18 months old.
And she wanders into this tense kitchen, naked.
And the stress, the tension, it overloaded her little system. And she started to pee right there on the kitchen floor.
And this is where the old suit comes out immediately.
Instantly. He described how he was raised spanking, yelling. He mentions his father, a Vietnam vet, working in a rock quarry, and implies that violence was maybe the main parenting tool he saw.
So his reaction was automatic.
Completely. He picked up his daughter, gave her what he calls one good firm smack on her bare bottom and scolded her. Conditioned response, textbook matrixes stuff.
Those old neural pathways just fired.
Instantly. Punishment mode engaged. But then comes the moment that just shatters everything for him. The intervention, you might say.
What happens?
He puts her on the toilet, stands over her, scowling, probably expecting her to cry or react to the punishment. But she looks up at him. This tiny child, not even 2. And he describes it so vividly. The biggest tear forms in her eyes and crests her cheek and rolls down her face.
Wow.
And he says in that exact moment, seeing that single tear, all his ingrained conditioning, all those neural pathways built around spanking and hitting, they just dissolved, melted away.
It wasn't like a thought process, though.
No, he describes it as immediate, visceral, a profound emotional and neurological shift, triggered purely by seeing her pain, by empathy. He just knew he couldn't do that again, ever.
That failure, that smack, led directly to a turning point.
A huge one. He got down on his knees right then, held her hands and said, "I'm so sorry, Daddy will never hit you again."
And that promise came from the mistake itself.
From the searing awareness born out of that mistake. He didn't have a new plan figured out yet, but the boundary was drawn instantly.
That's incredibly powerful.
And it really drives home the deepest point in this material, I think. That failure, that mistake, painful as it was, wasn't the end. It was the absolute beginning of his new approach. It forced him to search for something different.
And that connects to his point about discipline, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. He emphasizes the actual definition.
Right. Discipline doesn't mean punish. The root, meaning the definition of discipline, is to teach.
So that mistake pushed him from a punishment mindset to a teaching mindset.
Exactly. He had to find ways to teach his daughter, not just control and punish her.
So looking back at lesson 8 overall. Brian Post sees that moment, the smack, the tear, the apology, as what?
He literally calls it probably one of my biggest failures and also one of my biggest points of growth throughout my entire life.
A failure and a growth point, simultaneously.
Yes.
Yeah.
He says it fundamentally changed who he became, not just as a parent, but as an adult. And you can see how that experience would fuel his entire work on understanding and breaking the parenting matrix.
So the core message from Brian Post here is really quite stark. If you fear failure, you stay stuck. Stuck in the comfort, maybe, of the old matrix patterns.
But if you use failure,
It becomes the strongest catalyst for change you have.
absolutely, because when you're trying something truly new, trying to break patterns that might go back generations, that old suit, those old habits will come out. It's almost guaranteed.
The failure isn't the real issue then.
No. Brian Post shows us the real failure is refusing to do the work after the slip-up. Refusing to pause, breathe, reflect, observe, understand, and learn from it.
That reflective process is how you build the new pathways.
One mistake, one reflection, one new choice at a time. That's how the change happens.
So a final thought for everyone listening, building on Brian Post. If discipline means to teach, and if your biggest mistake could actually become your biggest growth point, what new lesson are you willing to teach yourself right now, today?
Yeah, what happens if you intentionally step into that discomfort he talks about?
What new path might you start building just because you dared to fail and learn? Something to definitely reflect on.
Absolutely.
We'll leave you with that thought. Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive. We'll catch you next time.